If you're listening to this as it comes out on New Year's Eve, well, listen, my Doctor Who in memoriam video, I do one every year and have done since, I think, about 2014. And you just have to type in Doctor Who in memoriam and then the year 2013, 14, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And as of today, as this is going out, New Year's Eve, there will be Doctor Who in memoriam 2021 appearing on my YouTube channel, Toby Hadoke, easy to find, at some point during the day. It is my way of paying tribute to those from the world of Doctor Who have left us this year. So if you would like to avail yourself of that, it's bittersweet, but I hope, a moving and apposite tribute. And if that is your sort of thing, I also have a tribute obituary show on Radio 4 Extra coming out. It's called Absent Friends, and it is on the 1st and 2nd of January in the 7th dimension on Radio 4 Extra at 6:50 and midnight 50 on the 1st and 6:50 and midnight 50 on the 2nd. It's 2 episodes, so each episode has different people in. That's Absent Friends with me, Toby Hadoke, on Radio 4 Extra. I do hope you can listen. Welcome to Happy Twice Upon a Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, accentuating the positive about an episode of Doctor Who and seeing if I can guess my special guest's favourite things about it. Well, welcome to this edition of Happy Times and Places. Before we begin, we're going to go into the future, where I'm about to have a conversation that I currently haven't had with this episode's special guest. Right, listeners, I'm in the future and I'm going to meet, and we've only literally just met, my special guest for this episode. So, hello, Joe, introduce yourself to me and to the listeners, if you would.
Hello, I'm Joe, and I've been watching Doctor Who since just about the 50th anniversary, which was 2013, and I've not stopped watching since.
And we just had this conversation, but the listeners didn't hear it. You were actually born after the series came back, is that right?
Yeah, just before the year anniversary of when it came back.
So you know that when old geezers like me are in our bath chairs, it's going to be people like you, down to you, that the future of Doctor Who will be in your hands.
Yeah.
Well, I was very impressed for somebody born after the broadcast of Rose. Do you mind if I share with the listeners your top 10 Doctor Who stories?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is very heartening, everybody. At number 1, Remembrance of the Daleks. At number 2, Logopolis. At number 3, Caves of Androzani. You like the landmarks, don't you? At number 4,
yeah.
Earth Shock. Number 5, controversial, The Happiness Patrol. Number 6, The End of Time. Number 7, Evil of the Daleks. I'm not going to say number 8 yet, because that's what we're actually doing. Number 9, Trial of a Time Lord. And number 10, The War Games. That's a very impressive list. So some bona fide classics there, and some slightly from left field. So what made you choose those ones when you were asked for your top 10?
I just thought, for Remembrance, I remember I've watched that countless times, because it was one of the few classic Who stories I'd ever had when I was little. And I love the music. I love the Daleks. I love the concept of a civil war in 1963, which I think is cool. And the others are just good stories with good music, just like Remembrance, really. It's just Doctor Who at its finest, most of them. And the others are just interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah. I love it. And your favourite Doctors are David Tennant, Peter Davison, Patrick Troughton. It's so heartening to see 2 classic Doctors on the list of somebody that has come to it afterwards. So when did you discover there was a Doctor Who before the Doctor Who that you knew and that was on the telly?
Well, I started watching when Matt Smith was the Doctor, and then I went on Netflix and I was watching the first revival series with Christopher Eccleston in it. And at first I just thought it was your younger Matt Smith or something, because I wasn't really understanding. But at the end of his series, I watched him regenerate and I was like, what's going on here? And then I started to look into it, and then I was like, this is a very old show. And then I think my parents told me, oh yeah, it's been going on years. So then just got into classic Doctor Who, and rest is history.
Well, look, for the purposes of the listener, but without giving away any of your 5 things, because we'll come back after the episode. But just tell us the episode that we've chosen. It was your 8th favourite story, which is the one that hasn't already been sort of claimed by somebody else. So tell everybody what your 8th favourite story is, and a general thing of why this is in your top 10.
Twice Upon a Time, because it really marks like, this is the Doctor now versus this was the Doctor then. It shows how the Doctor's changed. And it's one of the last good episodes before Chibnall takes over.
I will leave that comment standing. Oh, Joe, we've only just met, but this is marvellous. Well, Joe and I are going to go and watch Twice Upon a Time. And as are you, gentle listener, or you're going to listen to me talking about it, and then we're going to find out what Joe's 5 favourite things are, and if they are the same as mine. So that was my conversation with Joe, who I've yet to meet. So obviously I've yet to have that conversation. We're doing this slightly differently. This is a present for Joe's birthday. A colleague of mine, Brian Malcolm, said, what can I get for my young nephew who's a big Doctor Who fan? And I made some suggestions, and Brian said, what about your podcast? So I went, well, okay, this is the deal. So then Joe sent me a list of his favourite stories, which were topped by Remembrance of the Daleks, I think, and Logopolis was about number 4, and his favourite Doctors, I think, included Peter Davison and Patrick Troughton or Tom Baker. I mean, he's, he's really old school. But also he chose some new series stories as well, and this podcast is full of classic series stories, but I've not done a Capaldi yet, have I? And it's not got that many people queuing up to do new series stories, because I think nostalgia is a powerful tool. And whilst it would have been exciting to have a 15-year-old doing a classic series story, I felt, no, let's force myself to watch something I'm not quite so familiar with, especially as we are doing this at Christmas time. This is possibly my last recording before Christmas. So in a couple of days, I'm going to hook up with Joe, but I'm going to have chosen and written down my favourite things, which at the end of this, we will then cut forward to the future and see if he and I are in accord. So the story that he has chosen, or he sent me a list of, as I say, his 10 favourites. From that list, I chose Twice Upon a Time. We might have told you that. You see, there might be a repeated information here because I don't know what we're going to say. Oh, it's very timey-wimey, which is very appropriate. So I am on iPlayer. You may be on something else. I've paused, having pressed play. So let us put our snow gear on and transport ourselves to the end of Peter Capaldi's reign as Doctor Who. And not for the first time. Let's go twice upon a time. Previously on Doctor Who, it says, now, first up, I'm a Doctor Who fan, so the idea of starting this with actual footage from the 10th planet, I sort of think, how lucky are we? I wouldn't have thought that this would happen. And, even I wouldn't have thought we'd have had, now they're called Mondasian Cybermen, but we'd had those in previous stories. And they'd really worked. And I love that design, having been really embarrassed about it when I saw them on Target book covers and went, well, no wonder they changed those. But then changing Hartnell into Bradley through actual footage from the show. That sort of ultra, and then having these shots, and they're kind of, some of the shots are exactly the same as the cine footage that we have of episode 4 of the 10th Planet, because we don't have the whole thing this far from being all over and going into the camera is pretty much sort of what we have. I remember that much was made of the actors playing Ben and Polly. Ben is from Hollyoaks, and Polly is Lily Travers, isn't she? Who's related to Bill Travers and Virginia McKenna, Born Free. And they end up not doing very much at all. I know a lot of the 10th Planet stuff was cut.
which is a shame because I do like seeing the 60s stuff in colour, but I believe it was shot in a sort of 60s way, and it didn't translate as well as they'd hoped, and they'd got lots of other stuff. I like the captions. I love this Arctic setting, Antarctic setting, the snow setting, the snow, and it's a beautiful set. And the cold, you do feel the cold, although it's beautiful. The colours of it are beautiful. I mean, it is slightly artificial. I mean, I feel I'm watching a set. Is that a but I don't mind that. It's got a sort of fairy tale. Like, I love the fact that they've recreated this set in the studio, which I'm assuming they have. If I find out now that they flew all the way to the Arctic, and I'm, because sometimes that happens, doesn't it? Where people go, well, that looked unrealistic. They were there. Some people go, his accent was terrible. That's his actual accent. I love the silhouette of the Hartnell costume. I love that Bradley's got the hat and the scarf. So associated with that. I wonder if it was an accident that in the 10th Planet, he occasionally sports the same look that he's not sported since the first story. The first time I saw Bradley, because I was obviously in an adventure in space of time very shortly, he was standing sort of on the step outside his caravan with that gear on, and I was lucky enough, actually, on the set. I said, have you watched much of Hartnell? And he said, oh well, they've got this footage, haven't they? That was coming out on the 10th Planet DVD that wasn't out at that point, of him being interviewed as William Hartnell. And that's not what I'd asked. I'd meant to watch lots of the episodes, but he said, I've seen this footage of Hartnell. And I said, oh, can't wait for that to come out. And he went, oh, I've got it here. And in a break when we were both outside having a fag, he said, oh, do you want to see that? And he gave me his iPad with the footage on, and I watched as David Bradley playing William Hartnell held his iPad with the actual William Hartnell on, and watched it outside as we had a fag. He's such a nice man. I mean, I had 3 lines in An Adventure in Space and Time, but he'd overheard me talking about being a comedian in Manchester, so he took my number, because he said, I'm working in Manchester a bit and I like comedy. And lo and behold, on his birthday, rang me up and said, are you gigging tonight? And I was, and we got him in. And he saw me at a train station on another occasion at Manchester Piccadilly, and called me across the concourse, Toby. And I'm just like, why do you even know my name? And I'd seen him play Gloucester at the Royal Shakespeare Company. He was at the time, he was first on my radar. He had exactly the career I wanted, which was to be an actor that people didn't really know, but was never out of work, and was playing all the choice parts at the Royal Shakespeare Company, the choice supporting parts, without the burden of command. And it just seemed like a brilliant career as a character actor. And then gradually he started to do bits of television. He was on Our Friends in the North. I mean, he was doing telly all that time, but prominent, noticeable bits of television. He's brilliant as Eddie in Our Friends in the North, and became, this household face, household name. And then I remember being told he might play William Hartnell when Adventure in Space and Time was being planned, and I just thought, oh my God, that is absolutely perfect. I hope he does it. And he did, and now he's become part of the, and he's an acclaimed actor, and he's become, part of the legacy, and does Big Finish, and it seems to have completely embraced, because sometimes you expect when an actor of, class and, theatrical heritage and cinematic heft gets a role in our funny little series, you think, yeah, they'll come in and go, I will bestow my greatness upon you, and then sod off. But not at all. April 1914, I think this is terribly moving. I think this is a brilliant setting for a Christmas Day episode, because it is everything great and wonderful and awful about humanity in captured in sort of one moment almost. The famous armistice truce where they play football, which of course is wonderful, except that an hour before that somebody probably died unnecessarily. An hour after that, some people some of those very people playing the football game died unnecessarily, probably killed by the people they were playing football with. Although I understand that there was a lot of time in the trenches where they actually just deliberately missed each other and only attacked each other when told to from above, which is which is great in one way, but almost even worse, just sitting there in abject misery and terrible conditions, waiting to be told to kill each other, people that you've got no hard feelings for, really, because you're, ordinary souls, who didn't win history's lottery. World War One is such a terrible. I mean, wars are terrible, obviously, but I think World War One is the sort of picture postcard exemplar of the futility and stupidness, and this Mark Gatiss character of that sort of stoical British chap, and all of that we find comforting, or certainly, white guys of my age find comforting, because it was part of what we sort of grew up with, and credit to the production team for making sure there is diversity within the ranks of the extras. It's always a good way to find out who's an arsehole on Twitter, because somebody will go, oh, but why there were black people there? Because there were. And having casting that also reflects society today is a good thing. I love the description of this in the script is she an ice maiden designed by Apple? I think that's a superb description, and it's a brilliant image and a great creature. But Gatiss and what he stands for, that sort of, it's all about honour and doing the right thing, old man, and manners, and yet actually what you're doing is rotten and terrible and awful and tragic, but you hide behind that etiquette and that proper way of doing things, because in a way that maintains the sanity, bizarrely, in a bizarre, insane way, if that's but great. So we've had his entrance, but now we're sort of going back and seeing it through his experience, and we have this lovely trio of characters and of Doctor Who greats. And I think it's lovely that Mark Gatiss is on hand to be there. I believe one of the reasons he's there is because Moffat wanted him as he was leaving, Stephen Moffat, the showrunner, and he's an important part of Doctor Who. And Toby Whithouse has played the German soldier, two of the few people who've written for Doctor Who and played a credited speaking acting part in it as well. Glyn Jones from the Space Museum and the Sontaran Experiment was for a while. And Victor Pemberton, Moonbase and Fury from the Deep, were the only ones for a while. The Doctors having a sort of a pesky relationship with each other is an honourable tradition, going back to Pertwee and Troughton, and it can sort of make sense. I suspect I would argue with myself of 20 years ago. And I actually really like this TARDIS. My TARDIS, that's good. Alexa, volume 5. I think I need to hear a bit more of this wonderful dialogue. I love Capaldi. I think he's so good. And I like the fact that as his Doctor's gone on, that sort of harsh haircut has given way to... he's almost like he has the haircut that Tom Baker had after he'd left Doctor Who a bit when he started, when he cut off all his locks and looked quite alarming. And sort of grows into the sort of wild. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is a story of accepting change, which, as I get older, is something that one realises one has to do, and not to be a stick in the mud, and to learn from those coming up behind, that you don't just learn. But I am going to argue the other argument as well, which I don't think is serviced well in this, which is you also learn from what came before. And I'm afraid the joke that old Doctor Who is some kind of chauvinistic stick in the mud is one that falls flat for me, and is quite forced and painful in this, and I don't like that. It's interesting. I think this is quite emblematic of the. I love this VHS video. Quite emblematic of the times, in that we are prone to at the moment. Well, one, holding off the regeneration, not wanting to change, because we are important. There is a huge. And this is Doctor Who aware of its own legacy, which I, as a fan, of course, have a love-hate relationship with. I go, because I can't believe that for me, starting with the 10th planet and actual clips from the 10th planet, I love this, and you've got the First Doctor, and the other part of me is going, but what will the casual audience make of this? Which, of course, is a self-loathing, flagellating thing. Casual audiences are usually fine, they accept what they're given, and there's nothing in this that means you have to know anything apart from the fact that he was the First Doctor, and that's explained in the thing. But you still whip yourself with the thorns going, no, this is the end of Doctor Who. The general public will not possibly understand this. They won't, and actually the general public don't understand quite a lot of Doctor Who because they talk through it all during Christmas Day, in my experience. But this is, it's all established within the script, and it's got this lovely dynamic and comedy of manners, and two very, very good actors sparring off each other. And I think Gatiss makes a wonderful sort of straight man. He's got such a charming quality about him. He's almost like he's preserved in amber from a previous time. And I think we're very lucky to have him. He's a marvelous actor. As a Doctor Who person, as a Doctor Who ambassador, he's a marvelous actor. But in my limited experience of him, he's a very kind and decent man. And he embodies a lot of those things that he sort of plays. Although I think I've seen him on stage a lot. I think he's a better actor than we sometimes see him as because of the types of parts that he plays. It's easy to underestimate somebody who does certain things really well, because one, he does them really well, but two, he can do. I've seen him on stage a few times in lots of different stuff, and he's, oh boy, has he got range and heft and all sorts of things. He's a terrific actor. All three of these are terrific actors. They're amongst the best actors we have. But this idea that we look at the past. I do like his the Doctor's embarrassment and disapproval of the electric guitar, which I'm not sure what I think of the electric guitar or the shades. I mean, they are a bit midlife crisis, aren't they? And is that deliberate? I don't know. I certainly don't dislike the shades in the way that some do, partially because Peter Capaldi rocks shades. I mean, Peter Capaldi is very cool. He is very elegant. But I am, as I say, I am not going to let them get away with. Who am I to say this? But the sort of repeated joke of, because there's a lot of looking at the past and wagging our fingers at it that we do these days, and we only make the progress we have because of the people that came before us. We were born into a world that was ever changing, and all of those changes that we then come to benefit from as we get older are changes that were initiated by those people in the past who then may have had a slightly different attitude to us about other things, or may have been slightly slower on the uptake of things that we are now battling for. But it's a very arrogant position to take, to go, that makes us better than them, because who are we to say we're suddenly the heroes of a movie we were not actually we were not even cast in, to suddenly be going, well, all this stuff that we know that these people didn't, we're better than them. Well, except swap places and then see how marvellous you'd have been. And I think a lack of that awareness, I think, smacks a little bit of a desire to, a little bit too much zeal to wag your finger, and we will come back to some of the contradictions of our age, of the things that we espouse, and I say this as a member of the probably metropolitan liberal elite, but I am very conscious of if views like mine are to prosper, they must do so by not patronising or being judgmental to people that don't hold them, and not to be judgmentalism from liberals is extraordinarily oxymoronic to me. I love Pearl Mackie. I really enjoyed this whole series prior to this. I'd felt it had really, Doctor Who had found a different voice and a little spring in its step, and I loved the TARDIS crew of Bill and Nardole and the Doctor. I think Bill is a great character, but again, here's an example of the liberal elite thing, actually, because obviously when Bill was announced as Doctor Who's well, first of all, Doctor Who's was she announced as Doctor Who's first non-heterosexual character? I can't remember the terminology, but loads of people who do, oh, what about Captain Jack? And so immediately go, here's an exciting thing, here's an exciting development for the show. Yes, but I think you'll find. Anyway, that aside, I was invited onto Radio 5 Live because, is it a problem that Doctor Who's new companion is a gay woman? Is that a, because there are certain people that think that in family-friendly entertainment, the idea of homosexuality shouldn't be raised. I don't know what's family-friendly about excluding a member of the family who might be gay, or empowering a member of the family who might be thinking that they're gay and thinking that they might not fit in, and seeing somebody a bit like them in this family-friendly show and making it more comfortable. I think these are forces for good. However, I also know that there are people, license payers, who are a bit more, shall we say, old-fashioned than that. I heartily disagree with those people, but I think the way to deal with it is to just do this, have a brilliant character played by a brilliant actor, and then it becomes normal and acceptable. And in fact, I've known situations where I'm from the middle of the countryside, where people with very, very old-fashioned views then get to know a black person because he frequents the local pub, or get to know somebody that they might not ordinarily mix with, and then they suddenly go, oh yeah, but he's all right, and then they realise, oh yeah, because he's all right, they might all be all right, and that's how we learn. If you suddenly storm into that pub and go, you're all racists and you better treat it, and I didn't like the way you looked at him, or the fact that you asked him third if he wanted a pint means that you're racist and should go to prison, is just going to get everybody's backs up. So exactly what Doctor Who should do is that he does look great in the screwdrivers, the sunglasses. Exactly what Doctor Who should do is to just have a positive role model, get on with telling exciting stories full of vim and verve and vigour, and break your heart occasionally too. There's a line in there about, I think you missed out some of the jokes in this, which I love. And so I went on 5 Live, and they said, so Toby, is it a problem, Doctor Who, having a gay female companion? And I went, nope. And the 2 BBC presenters went, nope, absolutely. Anyway, tell us about the new series. And I went, oh, no, hang on. This is why we're the BBC. We represent license payers. You as the presenter shouldn't. And I was interviewed before I went on, because they actually interview you to see if you have the right opinions, which I think's slightly odd. Now, as it turns out, I do have the right opinions because I'm a namby-pamby, weedy liberal. But I sort of thought, well, hang on, this isn't then putting the argument out there that is being had online, that people are saying on Twitter and on Facebook. And it's all very well to say, well, we shouldn't air those views. Well, if they're views held by people, now, that's not saying, yes, you let a racist on primetime television to just spout racist stuff. But I think the 3 of us in the studio could have said, and I think I did bring it in, or the presenter could have said, yeah, but people think this because they say they don't have a problem with gay people, but it's a family entertainment thing or whatever, and I could have made the points that I've made. But to actually, the fact that that's what I went on to discuss, and it was dismissed within seconds, that to me is exactly what people sitting at home listening and go, well, look at those 3 liberals who've all got a consensus view on this. Nobody's raised what my view might be. Now, I still think it's bizarre in the 21st century that there are people that aren't people that would make homosexuality illegal, or aren't people that, would be mean to somebody gay if they met them, but are still slightly uncomfortable with what they see as, an agenda or whatever. As I say, I think those people are wrong. But the way to convince them is not to have a radio program that immediately dismisses their view, because then they go, well, why am I paying the license fee? Because this does not serve my needs. And as I say, I'm not talking about pandering to extreme right people. I'm talking about, having out some of the stuff that people clearly talk about, because you see it on Twitter and Facebook. You see it in the Daily Mail even, which is a horrible newspaper that I dislike, but it has a lot of traction and a lot of people share the views of that paper. And I'm not one to go, well, then you should just not talk to them, because I don't think that's how you win arguments. Now, the best way to win the argument, as I say, is to do what Doctor Who does. But I thought that was a misstep. And I thought, again, emblematic of where I think we're going wrong slightly. This commentary's a laugh a minute, isn't it? I was surprised at sort of how low key this episode turned out to be. You know, it starts on in the Antarctic, on a battlefield, but a lot of it takes places in sort of rooms and in studio. And it is actually, looking back on it, I mean, it seemed so big at the time because it's got the first Doctor, and because Bill comes back, and because it ends with Capaldi's regeneration. And look, the Doctor's in the bubbles. It's got all the Doctors in. I love seeing all the Doctors. Although I've just failed to give the first time we did that in The Next Doctor as one of my 5 favourite things, and thus lost the competition. I don't think I'm going to win this. What have I got in common with a 15-year-old? I bet we choose entirely different things. Or will we learn that actually there's less that divides us, which would, I think, be a riposte to some of the things that I have just been talking about. To be fair, there was no I love that line about the jokes. I mean, it is the programming slightly self-referential, but it's Moffat's witty lines at their best are witty and really, really brilliant and strong. And there's something about a suspended TARDIS as well, I think, because it kind of resembles, like the TARDIS coming down in Fury from the Deep, and things like something we sort of seen in the show of old that was often done by a model shot, although in Fury part of it was done by helicopter, but some of it's a model, I think. But because it's sort of an actual version of something that we imagined happening in special effects shots of the TARDIS being dangled on wire. I don't know. I find it strangely comforting. I'm sure it's complete coincidence, but anything that reminds me of Doctor Who's past in the present, well, I suppose it makes me feel welcome. It makes me feel special. As I say, there's always that thing in the back of your mind going, I don't want to alienate the casual viewer. And I would have been bigger on that. But interestingly, I've seen a few people discussing this on Twitter recently and going, what? The casual viewer has always watched Doctor Who. And it's, I mean, yes, and it can go too far, sure. But I don't think anything in this does. And I think we're much more conscious of it being a problem often than it sometimes is. I like the mystery around whether Bill is Bill. I find Bill such a sad, tragic character in terms of what happened to her and her ultimate fate, and this sort of carries that on because, is the Doctor doubting her? Is the Doctor going to reject her? Alexa, Volume 6. I love this TARDIS control. This TARDIS control room, the Hartnell one. Hartnell. I mean, isn't it amazing how so many things that we thought, well, that's very 60s. That wouldn't stand up today. This looks absolutely magnificent. Obviously, it's much brighter white than and some of the walls aren't pill packets photographed and blown up large. And any shot of the spinning TARDIS going through the vortex makes me very happy. Bradley's got the Hartnell hands on lapels thing going strong. Don't do that. I think the astral map is a thing of beauty, and I'm going to let it distract me from the fact that they've gone, because they're from the 1960s, they were all awful. Gatiss just pitch perfect with his I can't quite keep up with this. That astral map is gorgeous. That console, which I think has Bernard Wilkie's name on it somewhere, is gorgeous. And isn't it lovely that actually this ties in with the 50th, which, Moffat, was a vital, was in charge during, but An Adventure in Space of Time was a part of its makeup. And in order to get, to see Capaldi out, they sort of drew it back to that, and of course Capaldi eyebrows made their debut in the 50th anniversary special. So I like the fact that all that tied up. They've even got the clock. And it's and of course, because Moffat wasn't originally going to do this, was he? He was going to go out and then we had this sort of protracted. He decided, we should have Doctor Who on Christmas Day. I think I read it. He didn't want Doctor Who to be killed again on Christmas Day, but he also thought, he can't imagine Christmas Day without Doctor Who. Which I have to say, I find the idea that if you're given something that has a prime time slot, the crown jewels of scheduling. Now that's I quite like the fact that Bill gets to do her, I'm gay and you guys, and their response. I do think that is quite funny, especially Gatus is sort of quite charming, but I like the fire from her, and it's interesting. It will be interesting to see how much of a period piece this makes it, because I'm assuming there's a lot of things in 20 years' time as a society we will have completely got over, which is obviously progress. But will I be watching this with my grandchildren and them going, why are some people, slightly uncomfortable about being gay, Granddad? And I go, because in the old days, some people were. And I'll go, oh, you really are from the old. It'll be the equivalent of silent movies, and outside toilets. But that's distracted me, hasn't it, from going, if inheriting a program that has a Christmas Day special guaranteed, and going, I don't really know what I'll do with that. It did strike me as a slightly odd move, I have to say. It's like me going, you can dine at the finest restaurant. Here's a brilliant menu. I won't know what to do with that food. Anyway, that's for another day. So again, we're quite small. This is sort of reminiscent of a sort of Star Trek planet, isn't it? It's a studio planet. I don't mind. It's beautifully lit, and this is again when I get something showing me that it's on location. And the Dalek mutants crawling around is again, it feels like it's something taking a sort of mystery icon from Doctor Who's past and giving it a new twist, or giving it a day in the sun. You're an ass. Oh, she says bloody. There aren't too many bloodies in Doctor Who. It's the bloody moon, isn't it? Now, that's obviously a line from the Dalek Invasion of Earth, but given to Doctor Who's granddaughter. Not something he'd just say to a random young woman of his acquaintance, but it's an excellent joke. I don't think it is. But there we go. I'm supposed to accentuate the positive. I mean, as I say, I love this. I just feel they really sort of struggle to jam that stuff in, and I'm not sure they needed to. They could have had. And there is a case to be said for counterpointing the values of the 60s when the show began and those today. But I think you have to be careful, and I think it perhaps needs to go both ways. I think there are things we might have done in the 60s in terms of community and neighborliness and manners and fastidiousness about certain things, and lack of acquisitiveness and community and all sorts of things that we could learn from today. I'm cautious of being. Oh, that's a brilliant reveal! Just that little hand, and it's the glass woman's hand. But so I could have done with a little bit of that. But I mean, I do think the sweetness of these two men learning from each other and learning to let go is actually desperately sad, but happy sad. That irrepressible joy of being alive, of renewal, of actually realizing that all the things that make you up are changeable if you want to be better, even though you might hang on to the way that you used to do things. And I'm very much sort of, as I say, I'm quite a nostalgist, so perhaps I'm too biased the other way when I get a bit stick up for the 60s a bit. I am a little bit sort of, but we used to do this way, and that is right. Now I have to learn from that because it's not always right. And I don't talk about this in these, but I think I perhaps I will, partially because I've been a bit critical. It's brilliant stunt work, this, and lovely, exciting. This is lovely, exciting action stuff. Lovely sequence, nicely done. Rachel Talalay is a fine director. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and there's something you have to learn about being totally self-absorbed, as you have to in order to recover, but also realizing that you are not the most important person in the world, and in fact are nothing. So actually you're not that important, so don't take everything so personally, and don't think that if you change this or you alter this it's going to be world shattering. It's not. And so the whole thing about regeneration and confronting your past and rebuilding yourself takes on a slightly different sheen for me as a close-up of a glass of brandy that I'd very much like to drink. That's something you learn, is that even in Doctor Who at Christmas time, you can't escape the booze that is everywhere, and that is everywhere and seen as a calming thing or a leveler or a joy giver or some warmth. Now, if I was from these days, I would go on Twitter and complain about it, but I realise that it's not most people's problems, and so I've got no reason to complain. I just have to get on with it. Look at myself now, casting myself as the hero in this movie. I love Mark Gatiss. I think that the captain may well be one of my favourite things. This is wonderfully shot. Rachel Talalay, who's a movie director, and was flown in to do Doctor Who's prior to this. I remember being so impressed when they got her, and obviously I think became a favourite of theirs, and is such a talent, such a terrific director, and seems to really have engaged with the whole thing as well. She's given loads of interviews and all that sort of thing. Hope makes one awfully frightened. It sure does. I think that's a beautiful bit of acting by Gatiss there. Now, Nikki Amuka Bird, because the world revolves around me, I always see when people are in Doctor Who that I have a connection with. I don't really. She's a wonderful actress. She's great in the remake of Survivors. She's in the Sleeper episode of Torchwood, which I think is a terrific idea for an episode, and she was excellent in it. But she was actually, I looked her up on IMDb when she did Sleeper, I think, because I thought she was great, and discovered she was married to one of my university colleagues, Jeff, who's a fantastic actor. They are no longer married. I've seen Jeff since, but again, so really, she's just a really good actress in this thing. But because, and I've never met her, but because there's that sort of connection. Well, because I think when you meet somebody at university, you're not the people, Jeff was a wonderful actor, but he was not the guy who'd played lead roles at the Royal Shakespeare Company yet. He is now. I loved Doctor Who. I wasn't the person who'd done the Doctor Who show and, become whatever it is I am. So I like all of those connections. All of this stuff I think is beautifully directed, and the lighting here is superb. I love these shards of light coming out of the windows and the way that they're lighting the faces here. It's real proper atmospheric Doctor Who. Again, you expect sort of, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was expecting a sort of epic adventure, but I'm actually quite enjoying the fact that it's a journey for a very small amount of people. The cast list is tiny. Oh, and I feel sorry for the guy who was cast as the technician in the 10th Planet sequences, whose scenes ended up getting cut. So he's not credited and not in it, but there was an actor cast. I hope they cast him again in another Doctor Who. It seems only fair, because there's nothing worse than being cut. I mean, whenever you do telly, loads of it's cut, and there's loads of good stuff cut from this between the main actors. But of course, if you're the main actors, you don't worry so much because well, I'm in the whole thing, so I might lose a bit of a scene, and that makes me a bit sad. but because I'd have liked that bit to have been in it. And then you sometimes go, didn't I do a bit here? And then you look and go, oh yeah, I had lines there. But if you've only got 5 lines and 4 of them are cut, or in the case of the poor fella here, you've got 1 scene and it's cut, that's a blow. That's not quite a Christmas present. And so we have this lovely Dalek. Nick Briggs, I think, never quite gets the credit he deserves for the Dalek voices. With fans have a funny thing about fans being involved with Doctor Who, don't they? And I certainly did when I was much younger. You know, when the idea that fans might write fan fiction or whatever, I go, well, I'm not interested. You want from proper Doctor Who, but of course, fan fiction is nothing more than an aspiring writer writing about the program that they love, and that's where you learn and cut your teeth and eventually become good enough, like Paul Cornell, Stephen Moffat, Russell T Davies, Rob Shearman. You know, some exemplars of writing Doctor Who. You know, again, it's that thing that we go, oh, well, a Doctor Who fan might write something that's too fanish. Not necessarily. A lot of Doctor Who fans have written Doctor Who that's done stuff that I might not have done with the Doctor Who because it's too far away from what I think of as Doctor Who. And the same with actors, you know, and some actors who are Doctor Who fans. Nick Briggs, but he's also a Dalek geek, brilliant as the voice of the Daleks. And, you know, Peter Capaldi, he was a fan. He wasn't just not like when you see, I'm amused when I see people like Michael Gambon listed on Wikipedia or whatever, I don't know if he still is, as, you know, Doctor Who fans who've been in Doctor Who, Peter Kay. You go, no, when Peter Kay and Michael Gambon say they're fans, what they mean is, I quite like the show and quite fancied being in it. They couldn't tell you who directed Creature from the Pit. Do you know what I mean? They haven't got the censor rights on DVD. Now, Frank Skinner has. He's a fan. Capaldi, proper fan. He's a wonderful, wonderful actor. I would have been interested to see him carry on. I never felt he quite had, because he was there for a long enough time. I will be interested to revisit his era, which I haven't done as often as I would like, because I feel that there's time. Do you know what I mean? And much of my focus is on the classic series because I'm a nostalgist. So I'm looking forward to this becoming nostalgia. And it is in itself an exercise in nostalgia. This is a beautiful set. And Bradley is a terrific actor with a wonderful face, and he's got that Hartnell's impassive thing going very well. Oh, and isn't it very clever how they tie in at the beginning? You know, the whole thing with the doctor, the Capaldi doctor saying, "Oh, your face isn't quite right" or whatever, because he's stopped his regeneration midstream, and that's why he looks a bit like David Bradley. Although I actually think the resemblance is perfectly well enough that it didn't need that. But actually, I like the fact that they've just added that just in case there is anybody there with a nagging doubt about the physiognomical similarities or otherwise. What does interest me, though, talking about cut scenes, is I know Ben and Polly had a lot of their scenes cut, and I mentioned much was made of those actors who end up not doing very much at all. But what interests me is, because I will champion diverse casting, I think it's very important, is that I would also like a diversity of shape. In that Michael Craze was a spindly young fellow, very good-looking guy, but he was of a spindly shape. Ben Jackson of the 21st century is massive. He clearly goes to the gym, as all young actors must these days. Well, why must they? Because casting people and TV people have a shape that they like their young actors to have, unless they're playing a comedy stooge or whatever. And I think the way that we look back now, this is why never be too cocky about how liberal your time is, everybody, because you do not know, and how liberal your values are, because you do not know what things you think now will be shown to be actually pretty awful. We look back now at the lack of colour and the relative scarcity of, say, strong female guest roles or whatever in classic Who, and people who are of a mind to do that go, oh yes, well, whereas we are making it, you know. I think in 20 years' time, people will look back and go, why did everybody have to look like they'd been to the gym? Why did that society want that? Isn't that a bit master racy? Because I do find that sort of, the body perfectionism that is on display in television, as I say, even from quite sort of supporting characters. Everyone has to look good in a pressed shirt if they're a bloke, even of my age. I think is quite harmful to society. Not in blatant ways as we see now, but I think in 20 years' time we might see and go, actually, hang on, that was, that set unrealistic expectations for people. That had impact on people's mental health because they never saw themselves as represented or whatever. I think I've probably mentioned before, and Andy Pryor, the casting director of Doctor Who, is brilliant at the disability representation. I think he's been ahead of at most, and I know that he's worked with my partner Shez on some of her initiatives for getting more disabled people access to the arts. But we will look back at even the most progressive programs of the 21st century and go, what there were still people playing wheelchair users who weren't wheelchair users. There were still people playing blind people who weren't blind. There's because society is rightly fighting some battles and not fighting others. And those who are minded to in 20 years' time could go, well, yeah, you were big on that, weren't you? But you turned a blind eye to that, which is why I always say, be sympathetic to the changes people want you to make. But if you're one of the change makers, just be aware that that you don't necessarily always occupy the moral high ground. This idea that he has to take Gatiss back to face his death. You sort of go, well, how we, this is a great central theme running through it, because for all the adventuring we're having, he's just having a sabbatical from the inevitable, which of course the Doctor decides to change. And then the beautiful, I cried, the beautiful fact that he turns out to be, is it the father of Brigadier, Colonel, not Corporal? He wouldn't have been a Corporal. He'd have gone to Sandhurst and graduated as a second lieutenant. And he certainly wouldn't have gone from Corporal to Colonel in, 8 years. But anyway, that's a beautiful design, by the way. That's a beautiful special effect of the Apple Ice Maiden. Toby Whithouse there, great guy, great writer. I love all of his scripts for Doctor Who. Nice to see him in the show. Nicky Amuka-Berg is a brilliant actress. She's absolutely stunning visually and vocally, and has a really lovely enigmatic quality about her. She's great casting for this. That's a great shot of the first Doctor on the skyline with the apple ice cream. Tell my family. And I love that. And I'm a sucker for it. It's real. Lethbridge too. I love it. I love the Brigadier. I love old Doctor Who. I love Nicholas Courtney. He was such a nice man. I love this bit. It makes me really happy sad. I like being happy sad. I like it when sort of happiness and sentiment make you cry. I think it's important to be in touch with your emotions, and I don't resist Doctor Who's soppy bits, but my soppy bits are probably not when there's a bit of love going on. Although that said, I cry at Rose and the Doctor a bit, but more when sort of bravery in the face of death, stoicism, that unspoken thing. And I think it's because it's hewn from the sort of adventure stories of my youth, not just Doctor Who. I used to read Commando mags, although this isn't really from Commando mags, but anyway, that old fashioned repression of emotion, which is again very unlike today. Now I think it's very important that we're in touch with our emotions much more now than we were then, and that dampening your emotions down can be very dangerous and harmful. But I also find there's something extremely admirable in the people that did survive these terrible things coming back and not talking about it, because there is also something to be said in that your problems are not other people's, and it's finding that happy medium. Obviously it's an improvement that we are now share and are not encouraged to suffer in silence. And a lot of terrible things obviously went on behind closed doors when people didn't talk about the war. But by the same token, there's also a lot of today, I'm so unhappy about this thing. I shall keep an eye out for if anybody says anything I could construe that means they're not taking that into account and make their tweet about me or their day about me or whatever. And I think there is a happy medium to be had. And I sometimes share things, but I largely don't. But this is beautiful. I remember I was introduced to the Christmas armistice by way of popular culture, by way of the video for the Paul McCartney song, The Pipes of Peace. And in the video, I'm sure I remember falling in love with that video. Paul McCartney plays the captain or the commanding officer on the British side and the commanding officer on the German side, and they're looking at photos of their loved ones, and they get up and they play football as they did. And I remember when it was on Top of the Pops or whatever it was on, I'm sure I remember Muriel Gray on the Tube accidentally calling it Pipes of Piss and then get really flustered, which sort of diluted the beauty of the thing. But it was my favourite song. I don't listen to it at all now because I think it was one of those things where actually the video was as much a part of it as the song. And as a result of that, I learned that there actually was a Christmas armistice. And I love this whole speech of Capaldi. I love the whole sentiment of it. I find this unbearably moving. And I've seen photos, you look at photos of World War and you look at those people and go, one of these people would died the next day, or was in abject agony. One of these, because it was, it was a visceral war where deaths were administered in mind-bendingly cruel and unpleasant fashion. So that's why we have to be careful about romanticizing such stuff as well. But there's nothing wrong with romanticizing the Christmas Day armistice, a moment amongst great madness where the things that divide us are less important than the things that we have in common. And I love that. I love those images of I know they're only a load of dirty-faced extras, but it's really movingly done, and it teaches these two something. I think that's a really wise choice, and an instructive one. And then it's what Doctor Who, inform, educate, and entertain, does. And I find it unbearably moving. War is hell, but actually under adversity, sometimes we show ourselves at our best, and that's there is something to be said where a complacent society falls into squalor of mind and humanity, and amidst all that madness. But the tragedy is that as I say, the next day those people were perhaps killing each other. I love the flicker of recognition from Gatiss. I found that quite moving. And I am soppy, but I'm not much of a sharer. I'm not a public displayer. So I've just gone against everything I've just said. I love this. This is like that flickering cine footage that we have. I adore the fact that they've done that. I adore the tying in of the 10th Planet, and it kind of ties in with what we know, because William Hartnell did have episode 3 of the 10th Planet off, because a fellow called Gordon Craig plays William Hartnell in episode 3 of the 10th Planet. Hartnell's penultimate episode, he's not actually in. So it sort of ties in with the production history as well. And I love the fact that it then goes back into the... and it even has to change aspect ratio because the past is another country. They do things differently there. But I love the fact that they're brave enough to have it. And it's a tribute to the show. It's a tribute to the long-lasting nature of the show, to nostalgia, to what brought us all here, to what brought us all to this point. But now they're going to have a little bit of indulgence for their era, which I think they have earned. But again, this is emblematic of the times that we live in. I mean, in the old days, regenerations could be unceremoniously brief. I mean, John Pertwee literally falls over and changes. I mean, there's no sort of even maudlin music. He doesn't get much of a speech. He gets a joke. Well, there's life, there's and then dies. And then the regeneration itself is the regeneration in Planet of the Spiders. I was appalled when I first saw it because it's just like, oh, what? It's just a. But friends of mine at the time say it was the most awe-inspiring thing because of what it was, not because of how it was done. Because it was Doctor Who. I mean, Planet of the Spiders is quite self-referential and quite epic, and it's a look back at the era in everything from the casting to the themes of, where it brings the third Doctor Who to, and yet it doesn't have that sense of, I'm a cultural landmark and this is an important moment right at the end in the way that it is staged. And Tom Baker's is a bit, and some are forced by circumstance, like Colin Baker's is not, but and Tom Baker's felt suitably epic because of the music and the clips and stuff like that. But Troughton's is an odd thing. I'm amused by the fact that Twitter's response to Clara, who I really like, and I think she's a really good actress. But it was clear that at this point that the showmakers were perhaps more enamoured of the idea of Clara than Twitter certainly was. Now, I don't mind people disagreeing with me if it's a funny outcome. And I thought everyone going F off Clara was actually quite funny. It's a very sort of I don't know if it came from other parts of the world as well, but it seems to me quite emblematic of a British sense of humour. But again, there's another thing. If people do a joke that is actually against my sensibilities, if it's a good joke, I'll take it. I think we should do that. And I love Matt Lucas's costume. I love Matt Lucas's judgment of the way he plays the whole series. He's very sweet, but he's also very, very funny. And another Doctor Who fan got into the show. I love that. And oh gosh, I gigged with him back in the day. We'll talk about that on another podcast. So yes, but what I'm talking about is this is very emblematic of, and I know it happened with the David Tennant regeneration as well, where it's the end, but the moment has been prepared for enough that I've got time to go to a book signing. The idea that these days, a regeneration can last in this. I mean, it's lasted a whole episode. In David Tennant's case, it lasted the last sort of 10 minutes of the story. But this is the whole, and that was partially because this is like a coda to the regeneration story itself, which is the previous episode. But it means the Doctor's regenerating all the way through, which I love as an idea, and I think they make great hay of it, and it's very thematically apposite, and it allows for a brilliant. I love Capaldi's brave sadness that he does here. But it is emblematic of the world today in which we are very wrapped up in ourselves and of our own importance. Now, this isn't necessarily a criticism. As I say, it's an observation about how what you do now with a regeneration story it's very much about what we are and what we're doing. Now, of course, you don't want it to be a damp squib. And Peter Capaldi has earned the right for a big exit. But it is very interesting, I think, how the way that we do things today allows in this case the Doctor to very much do quite a long Twitter thread of regeneration, if you like. It's a big Facebook sad emoji, and then basically everyone's coming back to say, "You okay, hun?" No, I'm absolutely fine. I'm absolutely fine. But he's beautiful. He's heartbreaking. He's such a good actor, and such a good Doctor. And I like Murray Gold's music too. And this is his last score for the show. And I like the fact that he gets to do a big speech, because he's the Doctor that proved that he could do a whole episode on his own, and this is wonderfully shot, and it's nice for Stephen Moffat to sort of state his case for what Doctor Who is about. Alexa, Volume 7. I'm supposed to talk, I suppose. It's a commentary. The cloister bell. God, that's a good sound effect. I love that library. What does the Doctor say? Do I agree with them all? Yeah, okay, basic stuff first. Never be cruel. Oh, cowardly. I mean, words of the master. I don't agree with never eat pears. The Doctor should not be a fussy eater. The Doctor is an example to children. I don't know what we gain. Anyway, I've done a whole podcast about that. Love is always wise. Well, that's an idealised thing. I love that shabbiness of his costume. Hate is always foolish, though. Even hating your enemies. Always try to be nice, never fail to be kind. Yeah, you mustn't tell anybody your name. Please, no, never tell anybody your name. Because, yeah, any showrunner that goes, I want to give that big secret away. Don't. Except children, I like that. I like that there's this connection that Doctor Who is and Capaldi's Doctor is so much like the sort of Hartnell of annual fiction, or almost the David Whittaker Hartnell Doctor of this sort of benevolent grandfather thing when he's saying this. But it is ironic that the Doctor that started off being the meanest and grumpiest of the lot is the one that says, be kind. That is quite emblematic of our times, because a lot of people that wag their fingers at people telling them to be kind dispense their liberalism with a distinct lack of kindness, because they think the people they're dispensing it upon don't deserve their kindness because they've decided that they're bad people. That's not what kind people do. I'm sorry. But so I think, so whilst I love this speech and Capaldi does it well, and I also agree with the sentiment. I agree with the sentiment, be kind, but there are a lot of people who wield those two magic words these days who then proceed to be the complete opposite. So the sentiment will not age. I hope our wrangling of it perhaps will. Not our, but quite a few people's. And it is a design flaw that a regeneration smashes your space-time ship to bits. But here we have a cracking start. She looks great in she looks like a scarecrow. Brilliant. And the ring falls off. Oh, and I love that music. It's an echo. It's that, didn't they call it the Chancellor Flavia music? Phil Collinson and Russell T Davies. That's brilliant. The reflection of the TARDIS in the eye, and then a POV shot. And I like this tradition of handing over and of getting a glimpse, getting a scene with the new Doctor. It just whets the appetite. It hasn't erased what's gone before, because it just makes you excited. And of course, that's probably what you would say if you suddenly found you were a woman, if you'd been a bloke for the past many times. And of course, that's a great sequence. And you go, and I remember there were rumours that the whole of the first series was going to be the Doctor without the TARDIS, so that Chibnall's going to get rid of the TARDIS because the Doctor's fallen out of the TARDIS. And that ended up being completely sorted almost straight away. But I'm sure it was a real sort of rumour of it's not going to be the TARDIS for the first 8 episodes or whatever, or the whole of the first series. Great way to end in peril. Each Doctor is reborn into peril. We're what is it? We're born straddling the grave. We really are. Oh, it's iPlayer, so I've got to stop it jumping the credits. I like the fact it credited the actors from the 10th Planet as well. Could really do with these credits being slowed down. That's not the fault of the programme. That's the fault of the BBC, public service broadcaster, that believes people can't read. Oh, I just saw Julie Ankerson's name, Foley artist to whom a recent episode was dedicated, because she's since passed away. Did loads and loads. We lose people from the new series too, you see. Of course we do. We are born straddling the grave. Well, look, I really enjoyed that. I found that much more emotional than I thought I would. And I thought I would struggle for things to say, because I'd remembered it being, we're approaching it. I was thinking, but it ends up being quite low key. But I had plenty to say. some of which I may have said before, some of which may have been me railing against things. Well, I am a liberal person who believes in kindness and decency and not getting... But in the same token, so when I express an opinion, I also absolutely think that I might be wrong. And if somebody wants to disagree with me, then please do. But disagree with me in a nice way. Just go, well, actually, Toby, I think I have arguments with my kids all the time, and I'll go, I think this is wrong, and they'll go, yeah, but Dad, this, and I'll go, oh yeah, and I sometimes even change my mind. So it's funny because I'm having to do this speech after this because I'm well aware that somebody might take, and remember, I haven't scripted this either, a non sequitur or a sentence, or deliberately sort of interpret something I may say in the worst way possible to say, well, that's because he doesn't like this or doesn't like that. I am as I say, a liberal, live and let live. Certainly very, anti-right-wing, anti-prejudice, all of those sorts of things. But I don't think that people that don't share my politics are evil. I don't think the way of winning the argument is to demonize people or to not question or to not have arguments. I think it's wrong to live in an echo chamber or to expect everybody to believe the same that you do, or to believe that your interpretation, even of Doctor Who. I think there's an interpretation easily made of Doctor Who making you a free market right winger, and in fact, I've encountered a couple. That's a perfectly legitimate view. It's all texts are multi-readable. I don't hold that view, but I almost did a podcast for us called Doctor Who Turned Me Into a Right Winger, and was going to sort of do that whole thing for 3/4, and then 3/4 of the way in, actually turn around and go, I don't actually believe any of that. I just thought it'd be fun to make the argument. But I know that certain people would turn off halfway through and take to Twitter and lambast me. Anyway, what are my 5 favourite things about that I'm going to have to choose and then obviously present to young Joe as or after Joe presents his? And I've got to not patronise Joe and go, well, I wonder what a 15-year-old would choose, because 15-year-olds are very wise. And he's also a 15-year-old that counts Logopolis amongst his top 10. So, he's not just going to go for, I like Peter Capaldi and Pearl Mackie and Matt Lucas or whatever, and I like the new things. So I say Gatiss as the captain and being the Brigadier, that the whole performance, the whole concept of that character. I've chosen the 10th planet, the whole way that's tied in with the adventure. I'm going to choose, I wasn't sure because it's a bit close to Gatiss, but I'm going to choose the Armistice setting. I think it's such a great choice. I think it's so moving, and I think it's a brilliant Christmas Day setting for a Christmas Day Doctor Who episode. I have to choose Peter Capaldi's performance, because again I find it incredibly moving, and a culmination of 3 years or so of brilliance, and I think he's a marvellous Doctor Who. But I think that sort of weight he carries around with him, the nobility with which he faces his downfall, which is similar to what Gatiss does as well, really, isn't it? Now, does the snow tie in with being the 10th planet as well? Maybe it does. Okay, well, I'll go for, because I love the, so I'm going to tie in with the 10th planet thing, the Hartnell Doctor's silhouette in the snow. I love that, and the hat. It's all of that. I'm lumping all of that together with the 10th planet. And I'll take the Apple Ice Maiden, because I think that's a great design, and I think it's really sleek and looks brilliant, and it just so simple. Probably wasn't. It probably took CGI experts really ages to do really hard things, but it looks really simple and clean. And I wonder if it will date in 20 years. I wonder if we'll look at that and go, that looks so 21st century Apple kind of thing. And people actually made things like that and thought they looked cool, but it looks great. So I said quite a lot there. I hope I wasn't too finger wagging. I think it's largely because a lot of the people being quite lectury these days are people that I actually agree with. I just think it saddens me that the modus operandi is slightly hectoring, and I think, dare I say it, slightly arrogant. And the reason I worry about that is because I don't think it wins you the argument. I see it harming the arguments I would like to make about not being prejudiced and about decency and all of those sorts of things. And I also think that the past may be another country, but other countries are beautiful and have a lot to offer. And as I say, we patronise it at our peril. And I think that's something that one can't say too often, because I remember saying it in Must Ain't My Doctor Who scarf. That was about talking head shows where people watched old telly and laughed at the special effects. And you're going, what, you're mocking a programme for not using technological advances that hadn't actually been invented at the time. So it's all, and I know attitudes are different, but to technology, but actually they're not, because they have to be formed through learning, through osmosis, through the passage of time, through different things coagulating, through different accidents of meetings and designs and minds, and the wheel rolls forward. That doesn't mean you look at the start of the journey and think the people that started driving the riding the penny farthing at the beginning of the journey were somehow idiots because we're now driving fuel efficient motor vehicles, and that everybody in between who drove fuel inefficient motor vehicles or dangerous ones or whatever were somehow awful people, because that was what they had created at the time with the circumstances that they were in. And I find that's the same with attitudes. I think you just be careful how assured you are that everything you think is great, because it might date, like my 1980s wardrobe has. Anyway, lecture over. I hope that wasn't too stern and lofty. It was more a plea for kindness and decency. Who's listening to this who's going to change their mind on anything anyway? Get over yourself, Toby. Tell jokes and do Doctor Who facts. Okay, well that's what it is. Look, this is the podcast. This is what I do. I must not apologise for saying the things that I say, because they're what I think, and you don't have to listen. So I hope you enjoyed listening to that. I'm going to go to the future and speak to Joe. I hope this conversation goes well. I'm quite excited to meet a 15-year-old young person who likes Legopolis in remembrance of the Daleks, which, by the way, had already been snaffled up, I wasn't being cruel withholding them from him. Over to the future, and I'll be back shortly. And so we're back. I've chosen 5 things, and to show I can't cheat, I'm showing Joe that I've written them down on bits of paper, so I can't change my mind after you've told me what they are. So, what's your first favourite thing about Twice Upon a Time?
The interactions between the first and 12th Doctor. Again, just how different the Doctor is now to when he was the first Doctor. I like the contrast between them both. I think it's interesting, to say the least.
And it's interesting because I talk about this in the commentary. Do you like the idea that the old Doctor is a bit reactionary, and we need the new Doctor to sort of teach him how to be a bit less old-fashioned, as it were?
I get it as this is what men were like in the 60s kind of way, but in the way of this is the Doctor, it doesn't make sense, because the Doctor should know stuff like what an air guitar is or what browser history is. He should know that, being a time-traveling alien,
That's a very good point. I also have the I also make the point quite a lot in the commentary is that the first Doctor wasn't a sexist 60s man anyway. But that's a
Yeah.
whole thing that they've heard me get cross about that. But yes, we like the Doctors bantering. Have you seen the Three Doctors or the Five Doctors when Patrick Troughton
Oh,
and John Pertwee fight with each other?
oh yeah, I've seen both. Really good episodes.
Yeah, yeah. I won't tell you what any of mine are until the end. So that's one is the banter between Doctors 1 and 12. What's number 2?
This one is an odd one, but I like the use of the Ninth Doctor's like melody theme throughout the episode when they're like talking about like why the Doctor left Gallifrey, or when the 13th Doctor's first on screen. I think it was really well used, and I just think it's a good piece of music anyway.
It is a beautiful piece of music, and I think they refer to it, don't they, as Chancellor Flavia in one of the commentaries that Phil Collinson and Russell T Davies did early when Doctor Who came back. I think they made the joke that the woman's voice, the ooh voice was
Yeah.
was Chancellor Flavia from the Five Doctors, the sort of ghost of Gallifrey. It's a lovely piece of music. What is your number 3 thing?
My number 3 would probably be some of the effects, like in the like battlefields in World War One, when everything stops. I thought that looked really good, because like you're making a person look like he's just in the middle of stop time, and it doesn't look like he's not there. It looks like he's actually there, and I think it's really good. I don't know if it was an effect or something else, but I just thought it looked good.
Yeah, it looks fantastic because they're frozen, but it doesn't look like they've pressed pause on the video or whatever.
Yeah.
So they'd have done it in the 80s, and they'd just press pause, and you can always tell there's a bit of a blur. So that was number 3. Is that number
Yes.
3? Number 4, please.
I am really. This is probably a controversial one, but I like how testimony isn't like evil, but I also like how they bring back Bill, if you get what I mean. I know some people weren't happy about that when it happened, but I like how they brought it back just so like they could have like, is this evil? Is this not? Especially some of the scenes with the captain and Bill in the first Doctor's TARDIS, where you can see the glass, and it's like, oh, is testimony evil or not? And even when I know they're not evil, I think, well, that's good, if you get what I mean.
I do get what you mean, and I really enjoyed that one. I love the fact that you kept guessing whether Bill Potts was benign or a malevolent force pretending to be Bill Potts. I think Pearl Mackie is wonderful, and she's so sort of human and immediate that you sort of going, but she can't be. And you go, well, no, if an alien's disguising themselves well, of course they'd be nice and warm and
Yeah.
human. But I love that shot when she goes to pick up the brandy decanter, and it's testament, it's the glass hand.
Yes.
I think that's really creepy. Yeah, good choice. And number 5, your final.
The use of David Bradley, because if I'm not mistaken, they used him in that like special An Adventure in Time and Space in 2013, and I think bringing him back was great. And the little transition between, in like the little scene in from like the 10th Planet, Emotions, Love, Pride, Hate, Fear, and then when it switches over to like David Bradley, I think that was really well done. And like the regeneration scene for when it switches back over to William Hartnell, again, it looks really like they've really put into consideration where the Doctor was, exactly how the Doctor was lying. So it just looks seamless when they switch back.
I think you're absolutely right, and I couldn't agree more. I love that changeover. Now then, I think you get to be arbiter of whether the things I've chosen match with yours. Now, of course, the rules are if more than half of the things I have chosen match what you have chosen, I have won. And if more than half of the things you have chosen I haven't chosen, you have won. There is no prize, only honour is at stake. And bearing in mind that England are heading for an Ashes whitewash as I record this, I think a similar thing may be about to happen. I'm not sure about this one. I will let you decide. I have put the 10th Planet Connection. So I sort of talked. So I didn't say it as you did about the use of David Bradley, which is I like the way you put that. I just sort of said the way that they worked the 10th Planet into it, the fact that as an ancient man like myself, the fact that a Doctor Who Christmas special on primetime British television started with a piece of black and white footage from 1966, and that all of that continuity sort of tied in with that episode that. Even I haven't seen episode 4 of the 10th Planet because it doesn't exist anymore. And the fact that they worked it in, as you say, so seamlessly, I adored. So does that count as the same as yours, do you think, or not?
Yeah,
Or you're letting
yeah,
me
I'd say so.
You're letting me have a point. That's very proving your worth again, Joe. That's very generous of you. I think you're safe though. My next choice was where did I go? Yes, my second choice was. It was the captain, and not only the fact that Mark Gatiss is so good at that sort of stiff upper lip British honourable soldier thing, but also the fact that he's related to Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. That made me cry. But that wasn't close to any of yours, was it? But
No. I did write that down when I was watching the episode, but I didn't mention it.
Well, that's okay. It's always a sign of a good episode if you're struggling to choose 5 things. Now, This one, I'm surprised. I thought you might have chosen this. And in fact, I hedged my bet slightly since I chose it on the track because I've added a bit to my little card that I've written. Because I chose Peter Capaldi's performance plus the last speech. So, which I didn't actually say during the commentary, but I thought, well, I've got to have the last speech. So I thought you might choose one or both of those. But I don't know, do we take his performance? Is it always so good we take it for granted, or just you were distracted by other things? But he's not on your list of favourite Doctors. That's interesting. So where are you? Where do you stand with Capaldi?
When he first came out, because this was like my first ever actual like regeneration to ever see, it didn't work with me. I did not watch a lot of Capaldi. I watched bits of it, like some of the series openers and Twice Upon a Time when it came out, but I didn't really get into him. And I've been meaning to rewatch like series 8, 9, and 10 properly because it is a shame that I never fully got into Capaldi.
Now that is interesting as an older viewer, because I know that we fans tend to be quite self-flagellating, and there was a worry. I certainly was worried and went, "Oh, is this harsher Doctor going to be off-putting to the younger generation?" And you're not the first. There's a young man who I speak to when I walk the dog in the park, and he also, having loved Tennant and loved Matt Smith, stopped watching the Capaldi era. So that's very interesting. Have you seen much Colin Baker?
I've seen a bit of the Twin Dilemma. It wasn't that good after the whole like changing, like getting into the Doctor, like the first few scenes.
Yeah.
I watched Attack of the Cybermen the other day, and I've watched all of the Trial of the Time Lord.
Oh, because
and Revelation of the Daleks.
Yeah, because Trials in your top 10. Because Colin, of course, tried to do that more alien, slightly spikier Doctor thing. Did you not find it off-putting in his case?
I know in the context of how it like ends with, oh, it's the Doctor, because obviously I know context that the Doctor's the Doctor, but I think if I watched it when it first came out, like going into it like, who is this like new Doctor and all that, I think I would have been put off a bit. But I've watched it myself years later thinking, that's all right.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? The context at the time is very different because the show survives, or the character endures, or whatever. Well, and also interestingly, I think I note in the commentary that it's ironic that the Doctor whose last invocation is to tell us all to be kind is when he started being Doctor Who was the most unkind and miserable git in the whole of space and time.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Sylvester McCoy's last words being "Don't roll your R's," or Peter Davison's to be, but don't play cricket. My next choice was, and I don't think I can have a point for this because yours was more about the special thing. I actually chose the setting of the Christmas armistice because I find that a terribly moving historical incident. Had you known about it before you watched the episode that there'd been a Christmas armistice in World War One?
What, when it came out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd actually just learned about it in school
Oh, wow.
I think about 2 weeks prior. Maybe
Oh, fantastic.
3, and we were learning about it, and then it came on Doctor Who, and like I love history and I love Doctor Who, so then watching these two things that I love just come together. Like I've been learning about this, I've been watching Doctor Who, and then the exact thing I've been learning about just comes together. I thought that was great, but no, I didn't put it in my top 5.
That's all right. That's all right. But I'm pleased about that as well because, you know, as I'm sure you know, Doctor Who's original remit was to teach us about history
Yeah.
through adventure. So it's, you know, still doing that, and I do find that. Now, I think my last one is a bit rubbish, and I think all of yours were better. So my last one is, I think. So bad. You've done well not to have chosen it, because I wasn't sure. And then at the last minute, I've gone for the design of Testimony. I liked Stephen Moffat's description in the script of something like it's an ice maiden as described by Apple, as designed by Apple, or something. An ice queen as designed by Apple, and I just like that sort of sleek silhouette that she has. I think it's a really effective special effect that looks simple but effective.
No, I didn't. I can like really like the effect, to be honest with you. I thought it was just a bit cheap, if you get what I'm trying to say.
I
It
do,
looked
yeah.
good, but not something I'd expect from a 2017 episode of Doctor Who. If you put it in like a 2005 episode, I'd go, that looks brilliant. But you put it in a 2017 episode, and it'd be just like, okay, that's fine.
Oh, you expect a bit more. Now, that's interesting. I was almost ashamed of it as soon as I chose it, so I'm glad. I'm glad. Now, that's interesting. So, can you? Because it's harder for me because this is all new Doctor Who. You see, so can you very much differentiate between the sort of vibe and the production values of sort of 2005, 6, 7, 8 Doctor Who and Doctor Who now? Because I suppose, you know, that 15 years for me as an older person it seems quite short, whereas to you it's sort of your lifespan. So
It is my lifespan.
does Rose look like ancient history to you then?
Uh, I think if I'd only just got into Doctor Who now, then yeah, but I've been watching the series for years, so not really. No, it just looks a bit off. But other than that, it's like this is still Doctor Who. I've watched older.
Yeah, and you still got plenty of older to watch, which is good. All right. Well, I promised I wouldn't take up too much of your time. But what to you as the younger generation, in whom I invest a lot of hope, and it's so nice to meet such an eloquent advocate of the series that I love, because it's important that. Obviously, old fans like me, it's nice that we like it, but it's vital for its future that it's still capturing young and imaginative people like you. So what is the appeal of Doctor Who to you? What's made you do such a deep dive into what is, after all, a daft tea time family entertainment show?
Well, first off, it's age of being like over 50, nearly 60 years old. That to me, even when I first got into it, was, well, that's amazing. I want to learn. I want to know what was happening. I just want to know loads of stuff, you know? And all of the actors that have played the Doctor and how it's spanning back from like 60s and it's still going on today. It's just interesting to learn about, interesting to know, and I just like the show.
Well, I think that's brilliant, Joe, and I'm very grateful that you've participated in my silly podcast. The future lies with you, so you'll be showrunner by in about 30 years' time. So remember an old actor that's be in need of work. Are you having have you done a Christmas list? Has it got Doctor Who stuff on it?
I haven't done a Christmas list, but I know that my mum has got me a Dalek at least, and an adipose.
Oh, very nice.
Yes.
How do you feel about the fact that Doctor Who's not on Christmas Day now?
Well, yeah, I do like Doctor Who on Christmas Day. I always think that's the proper way for Doctor Who to do specials, and especially with Chibnall only doing Dalek stories in the New Year's. Don't get me wrong, I do like the Daleks, but every New Year being a Dalek story, it's not surprising anymore, you know? It's just, oh, it's the New Year, let's get the Daleks out.
Yeah. Spoken like a true fan there, Joe. Brilliant. Well, look, I hope you have a lovely Christmas. As we record this, it's a week before. I think we're going to release this on New Year's Eve. So everyone will have had their Christmas. So happy Christmas, everybody. And happy Christmas to you, Joe. Good luck. Keep watching, and maybe we can reconvene in a year's time and see what we've made of the year to come, and of course our anticipation of you looking forward to Russell T Davies coming back.
Oh, there is nothing I'm looking forward to more.
Oh.
Save the show, please.
Amen. Well, I have to remain neutral, but Joe, thank you ever so much for your time. Happy Christmas to you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's that. This is probably my last podcast before Christmas. This is going out on Christmas Day for patrons. Non-patrons, you will have had The Next Doctor on Christmas Day, which patrons have already had. And you will be getting this, I think, on New Year's Eve. So, if you're listening on New Year's Eve, that is also the date that I released my Doctor Who annual In Memoriam video, which is something I spend the entire year putting together, and it's a video to remember those from the worlds of Doctor Who, including Julie Ankerson, whose name I saw on the credits there, who have passed away this year, whose deaths we learnt about this year. There are a few from 2018, 19 and 20 whose deaths only filtered through this year, and it's got clips and pictures and music, and it's something I do. If you want to see the previous ones, just search Doctor Who In Memoriam. I think 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Does it go from 2014? Maybe it goes from 2015. I can't remember. There's loads of them there. Have a look. Labour of love. Please be kind about them. Give them a thumbs up. If you don't like them, don't give them a thumbs down. Instead, go and find something else that you do like and give that a thumbs up, because just one thumbs down can put an icicle through your heart when you've spent a whole year making something and somebody just casually, just decides to be unkind about it. And I'm also doing a show on Radio 4 Extra, which is another roll call of the dead. I specialise in mortality, which is called Absent Friends, and it's on BBC Radio 4 Extra at 6:50 on January the 1st and January the 2nd, and will be on iPlayer thereafter for a month. And that is me paying tribute to the people from the worlds of science fiction and fantasy, not just Doctor Who. And there are some Doctor Who figures and some clips, so have a listen to that. Happy New Year to you if you're listening to this on New Year's Eve. Patrons, happy Christmas. I think you're listening to this on Christmas Eve, actually. I'm releasing this on Christmas Eve, but you may have better things to do. So patrons, happy Christmas. What's a patron, I hear you say, non-patrons? Well, I'm sure I'll tell you about that in the voiceover at the end. But I'm very, very grateful to the patrons who've supported me all of this year. As a freelance artist, making a living has been quite tricky, and the fact that people put their money where my mouth is extremely touching. I hope you've had a wonderful festive season, everybody. I love Christmas. I hope the snow is falling, and there's an armistice in your home, wherever it may be. Eat, I'll even say it, drink, even though that triggers me, and be merry, and have a delightful, delightful time. Lots of love. Be kind. Goodbye. Happy Christmas.
Thanks so much for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Young Joe. My thanks to Brian Malcolm for facilitating that hookup. And wasn't Joe marvellous? Now listen, these podcasts would not be possible without the help of patrons, who include Stephen White, Andrew Wilson, Andrew Willis, Michael Williams, Rich Wiggins, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, David Trainier, Reynard Toombs, Sabrina Tirabassi, Nick Temple, Neil Tate, Keith Say, Matt Sawyer, Jim Saxter, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Richie, and Ruben Herfindahl. The music for these podcasts is by Dave Gates. The podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson. And may I wish you all a very happy Christmas and all the best for 2022. There is a Patreon subscription for my podcasts. So if you just got wished a happy Christmas and are listening to this on New Year's Eve thinking, what the heck's he going on about? It's because patrons got this on Christmas Eve. And that's a pretty tight turnaround, because normally they have Happy Times and Places about 4 or 5 months earlier than you lot do. So there's a real chance to get bonus and early and more frequent material. You get 3 releases a week when you are a patron, and that starts from as little as £3 a month, and you get pretty much everything on the bottom tier, bar a couple of things. But it's pretty egalitarian, and you can also get 10% off whatever tier you're on if you subscribe for a year in one go. If you would like to go to Ko-fi, which is ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, then you can just do a one-off payment whenever you like if you think I sound hungry or needy or whatever, just in need of a virtual coffee. And I understand, of course, that times are tough, particularly around Christmas and New Year. You've spent all your money. Well, do you know what costs you nothing? As you're leafing through the quality streets to see if there are any decent ones left, you could go onto Apple or to wherever you get your podcasts and give Toby Hadoke's Time Travels 5 stars and perhaps a couple of lines of review. That really helps to tweak my algorithms and send them into 2022 looking all hot and exciting so that Passing Trade just snaps them up. That got a bit saucier than I'd hoped.
And don't forget, if you're listening to this on New Year's Eve, to check out my Doctor Who In Memoriam video, which comes out today. Doctor Who In Memoriam 2021. Should find it for you if you Google that. It's on my YouTube channel, Toby Hadoke's YouTube channel. If you're listening to this after New Year's Eve, well, it should be out already, but in case you've missed it, Doctor Who In Memoriam 2021. And also, I have 2 shows of obituaries on called Absent Friends, 6:50 and Midnight 50 on BBC Radio 4 Extra on the 1st and 2nd of January. And that is 2 separate instalments, both featuring different people, including a number of Who alumni and some clips from Doctor Who. So please tune in if you can. Because that's how I spend my Christmas, folks, making lists of the dead. Which is probably something I need to discuss with a therapist at some point. Oh well.